This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Global Democracy for Global Peace. We are pleased that you could join us. My name is Luis Bispo, and I will be the facilitator for this session. I consider myself a world citizen and a world federalist. We have a great program today, and we are looking forward for your engaging discussion. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge our country. I would like to state that we respect and honor Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, elder, past, present, and future. We acknowledge the stories, traditions, and living cultures of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people in this land, and commit to building a brighter future together. We are all aware that our planet is facing a multitude of crises, ranging from the threat of nuclear weapons and climate change to poverty, inadequate access to education, and the rise of autocratic regimes. To address these challenges, one possible solution is to promote democratic forms of governance across as many nations as possible, and to foster global unity in standing against dictators and totalitarian systems of governance. Therefore, we are gathering here three excellent guest speakers. They are Elsie Mulindi, CEO and Chair of Democracy Without Borders, Kenya. Professor Luis Cabrera, he's Professor of Political Science at Griffith University. And Dr. Rosa Groen, Senior Researcher at the Hague University and Associate Professor at Holland University. Each speaker will have about 10 minutes to deliver their thoughts and insights on the theme of global democracy for global peace. After their talk, we will have a Q&A session. So just a little bit of housekeeping rules for this webinar. This session is being recorded. The recording will be shared with participants after the event, and it will be an educational material. Please keep your microphones muted during the presentation to avoid background noise. You can use the chat box for questions. We'll have a Q&A segment at the end. Let's keep this webinar respectful. Everyone's voice and perspective matters. We'll do our best to stay on schedule and wrap up on time. So let's get started. Our first speaker is Miss Elsie Mulindi. Elsie Mulindi is a seasoned social development leader and project planning and management specialist with over 20 years experience advancing gender equality, social inclusion, and participatory governance. She currently serves as CEO of a non-government organization and vice chairperson of Democracy Without Borders Kenya chapter. Elsie is widely recognized for her strategic leadership, policy influence, and lifelong commitment to building inclusive and sustainable communities. So Elsie, I'll give the screen to you for you to deliver your message, your insights about global democracy for global peace. So the screen is yours, Elsie.
Thank you very much, Luis, for that introduction. I choose to title my speech today, One Planet, One Promise. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow speakers and friends from every corner of the planet, I greet you from Kenya. It is indeed an honor to be part of this vital conversation under the theme, global democracy for global peace, a pathway to unite all nations to protect all humanity. Now, the title of my talk, as I was thinking about it, Our Planet, One Promise, may sound very poetic, but it carries a very practical truth that I want us to share together today. The phrase One Planet, One Promise reminds us that every sunrise that we share is the same. Whether you watch it from Nigeria, whether you're watching it from New Delhi or from New York, it is the same. It is a quiet reminder that we are all bound together by something that is greater than borders. We are bound together by one planet and one promise, the promise of a shared future. It reminds us that democracy is not only a system of governance, it is a development choice. It is a shared responsibility, the way of organizing our societies so that peace can take root and flourish. It is democracy that enables us to make collective choices about how we live, how we develop, and how we care for one another on this planet that we all call home. When we say one planet, we affirm our shared responsibility. And when we say one promise, we commit to ensuring that no one is left behind as we pursue progress, peace, and democracy. And that, my dear friends, is what global democracy for global peace is truly about. Simply put, democracy is the bridge through which lasting global peace is built. Allow me, friends, to define the connection between sustainable development, democracy, and peace. Democracy provides us with the space for inclusion and for shared progress to emerge. But democracy cannot thrive in isolation, nor survive on goodwill alone. It needs foundations. It needs food security, quality education, good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, gender equality, and yes, the list goes on and on through all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And those, my friends, are the building blocks of democracy that sustain peace. When communities have livelihoods, when there is equity and sustainable management of natural resources, democracy takes root and deepens. And when democracy deepens, peace becomes self-sustaining. Let me take you all to a small coastal village, any coast, any country, because this story belongs to us all. There, fisherfolk once struggled as overfishing and rising tides destroyed their single source of livelihood. But when communities came together and discussed possible solutions, the elderly, the women, the youth, the local leaders, persons with disability, they restored their mangroves, set fair fishing rules, and protected their shorelines. Within a few years, the fish returned, children went back to school, and the village council became a model of participatory governance. They didn't just save their fish, they saved their faith in democratic decision-making. And here is the beauty, friends. Local disagreements that once divided the community began to fade. Why? Because when people participate, when sustainable development is evident, democracy thrives and peace follows naturally. And right there is democracy at work, advancing sustainable development, and in doing so, creating peace. This story may sound very simple, but it reflects a profound truth that sustainable development empowers democracy, and democracy in turn nurtures and safeguards peace. Sustainable development goals are the vehicle driving democracy for global peace. They are not just 17 colorful icons on the UN chart. They are the universal roadmap for democratic participation, shared prosperity, and global peace. For example, when goal number 1, no poverty, is achieved, citizens are free to engage meaningfully in their societies without dependency or desperation that can lead to conflict. When goal number 4, quality education is realized, people develop the knowledge and critical thinking that strengthens democratic institutions. When goal number 5 on gender equality takes root, every person has a voice and agency in shaping responsive and inclusive societies. When goal number 13, climate action is pursued, we protect our shared home that sustains every nation, ensuring that future generations inherit a sustainable planet, making peace intergenerational. Together, all these goals remind us that achieving the Sustainable Development Goals is not just development work. It is democracy in action, creating the conditions for lasting global peace. As the UN Secretary General once said, and I quote, "There can be no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development." And honestly, I really think that the planet sometimes looks at us and says, "You humans argue a lot, but at least you're trying." And it's true, we are trying. In continually embracing that sustainability, democracy, and peace are not separate goals. They are one continuous promise, mutually reinforcing promises of our shared humanity. And therefore, friends, as we reflect on the promise of global democracy for global peace, I want to acknowledge some of the vital initiatives that Democracy Without Borders is championing today. These include 1, the campaign for a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, which envisions bringing elected representatives into the heart of global decision-making. 2, the promoting of creation of a UN World Citizens Initiative, enabling individuals worldwide to directly propose issues to the UN agenda. And 3, the support of global citizens' assemblies as inclusive forums that bring together people from all walks of life to deliberate on global challenges. Each of these initiatives demonstrate the pathways to translate the Sustainable Development Goals into actions towards realizing global democracy and peace. Now, what does that mean for all of us? It means that whilst many challenges remain and the pace must be accelerated to meet the 2030 targets, we can still, as a people, take a moment and look at our past and recognize what democracy has helped us achieve so far through sustainable development. 1, extreme poverty has since declined dramatically in the past 3 decades. 2, more and more children, especially girls, are now in school than ever before, including improved completion of each level of education, not just enrollment. 3, global health cooperation has shown that when nations work together, lives are saved. And 4, renewable energy, once a dream, is now one of the fastest growing energy sources worldwide. And this list is certainly not exhaustive. Every sustainable development goal milestone achieved has lit a candle for democracy and for global peace. Each of these milestones is not just progress, ladies and gentlemen. It is democracy in motion, global collaboration translating shared values into shared victories. It also means that now, as we look ahead, we can again take a moment to reflect together on our future roadmap. What kind of sustainable development goals, progress do we want to continue achieving and that truly protects our shared planet? What kind of democracy do we want to continue building and that does not leave anyone behind? And what kind of peace do we want to continue nurturing and that is truly, truly global? Friends, every act of stewardship, from combating climate change and its impacts to advancing inclusion, from building accountable institutions to investing in industry, innovation, and infrastructure, is not just an act. It is an act of democratic peace building. And so as I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, the bigger question is, what is our one promise to this, our one planet that we share? Our one promise should be to strengthen democracy as the foundation of global peace. And how do we do this? By ensuring that sustainable development remains at its core, that we shall use every sustainable development goal as a tool to deepening participation, fairness, and accountability, that we shall make sustainable development the heartbeat of democracy, and democracy the guardian of peace. Our one planet reminds us that democracy is not a destination. It is a daily act of cooperation, a practice of peace, and that peace knows no borders. So as we leave this room today, I challenge you, friends. What one promise will you make to strengthen democracy for global peace? Because in the end, friends, peace is not something we inherit. It is something we democratically build and sustainably develop together, one promise at a time, on this remarkable one planet that we share. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
That was wonderful, Elsie. Thank you so much. Very powerful message. I really like the way that you brought the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals, as super important to achieve an effective democracy. Because I was just thinking, like, if people they don't have food, if they don't have water, how they can have the energy, the intellect to participate in democratic decisions and get involved in initiatives. So it's amazing how everything is connected and linked. So thank you so much, Elsie.
Absolutely.
Now I would like to let's move on to the next speaker. The next speaker is Professor Luis Cabrera. He is a professor of political science. His research has focused on theories and practices of democracy, human rights, and regional and global citizenship. He has authored 3 books and edited or co-edited 3 others, besides publishing more than 40 journal articles and book chapters. His most recent monograph is The Humble Cosmopolitan: Rights, Diversity, and Trans-State Democracy, published by the Oxford University Press in 2020. He teaches courses in international relations and career pathways in political science and international relations. So, Professor Luis Cabrera, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I would take a tutorial. I see share, so I will try to share. Sharing is not turned on. I can request it for this meeting, it says. So my request has been sent.
Yeah, accepted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Luis, for that warm intro. And what, Elsie, that's a hard act to follow. I'll do my best. What a great talk. So let me show it from the beginning here. So this is my current thinking, my thinking in process. I've got a book underway. It's the worst time there's ever been to write a book about how to get to world government, but it's always been a bad time to write a book about how to get to world government. It's occurred to me that that global democracy and democracy are so intricately connected that really speaking about how to get to robust, decent democracy is also talking about how to get to regional and global forms of democracy. So that's what I'd like to talk about today in the framework of addressing our age of anti-cosmopolitan calamities. So we've all seen the news probably too much. We probably should stop watching the news, but it was a little hopeful this weekend. We saw all these folks out, 7 million of them at last count, in the United States, 2,500 cities and towns across that vast land, coming out to push back and say our democracy has been taken too far in an anti-democratic and illiberal direction. So I want to use that as sort of a frame. So I want to start by speaking about cosmopolitan citizenship. And by cosmopolitanism, I mean something fairly precise. So it's a moral approach closely related to world citizenship. It's something I've worked on for a long time now, probably 30 years. And it sees us all as part of the same human community, just like world citizenship does. One thing that sets cosmopolitanism apart, at least small L liberal moral cosmopolitanism, is that theorists have sought to spell out specific duties that all persons are owed in that community. And I've framed those as duties of global citizenship. So I've argued that our duty should include supporting the development of rights advancing and more democratic regional and global institutions up to a democratic world government in the longer term. So the aim is a global system in which anyone born anywhere would be able to live a decent material life and see their human rights protected and promoted at all levels, from the local to the global. And this is, as Luis mentioned, this is my latest book where I explored some of those ideas. Really, this book was about addressing frequent objections against cosmopolitanism as a Western imperialist construction. And I tried to say, no, actually, some of our most inspiring thinkers beyond the nation state, thinkers of universal human rights, were people like B.R. Ambedkar, shown here on the placard. The young man is using to shield himself from, you can't see it, but it's police water cannon spray at a protest in India. So I spent a lot of time in India learning about Ambedkar and talking to people who were inspired by his work as a champion of Dalit rights, people formerly called untouchables, who were reaching out to the UN human rights system to try to pressure their own government to do better on Dalit rights. And that seemed to me a very stirring case of institutional global citizenship, seeking to use institutions to act as or like global citizens. Okay, getting to that better global country looks a little tough from where we're sitting right now. And, you know, pendulum swing, we're at the other end of the pendulum swing, I would say, all around the world. So it seems a fraught prospect at present to talk about getting to global democracy. We've seen this rise in illiberal, authoritarian leading governments and political parties worldwide over the past 2 decades. You can name country after country. And in some, it turned out okay in the end. You know, Brazil came out of its sort of flirtation with authoritarianism under Bolsonaro and is heading back in a democratic direction. The United States, we'll see. I think watch this space. But as you can see, since about 2008, 2009, we've seen a wave of autocratizing countries. So we had seen the third wave of democratization. You know, at one point, 122 countries were counted by Freedom House as being at least partly free or mostly free as democratic. And now it's a good bit less. So, and we're seeing less democratic momentum. We're seeing fewer democratizing countries. So we are in a difficult position to be talking about this sort of thing. But I think that's just the point. That's why we need to stop and think about why and how we still need to talk about ambitious institutional reform, including beyond the nation state, democratic institutional reform. So what is the challenge? I would maintain that we can understand illiberal democracy and anti-cosmopolitanism as part of the same cluster of ideas. Often it's the same people offering these critiques. So you'll have Stephen Miller and Donald Trump talking about globalists as if they're terrorists, as if it's something really evil to believe. It's a betrayal of the nation state. And they're also the ones, Miller especially, I think is sort of the brains behind the operation, as far as we can tell, who are pushing this sort of illiberal democracy in the United States, trying to undercut the opposition so that they will not face an opposition that has any sort of strength. And we've seen that, around the world, from Putin's Russia to Orban's Hungary, to country after country, arguably Modi's India. So I've looked at the challenge in terms of promoting political humility. And again, I learned from Ambedkar on this because he was born a Dalit. He was born an untouchable, and he tells stories about being shunned at school, and all the stories we've seen in the movies and things like that. And you could tell the same stories in the United States about the way African Americans were treated. The reason I went to Ambedkar is because he wrote so eloquently about these kinds of things and about pushing back, not only regionally, not only nationally, but also globally. So he reached out to the United Nations, or looked at reaching out to the United Nations in a way that inspired his followers generations later. Political humility. So what is it? It makes robust democracy possible. I've been playing with metaphors, and really, I think the most apt one is kind of one that we wouldn't really want to use. It's sort of like motor oil. It's not the gears, and it's not the pistons, it's not the metal of the motor, it's not the structure of the motor, but without it, the motor really can't run. It will soon seize up. Political humility involves us seeing each other as equally worthy participants in political dialogue, seeing everyone as deserving of voice and consideration, equal consideration, not claiming a right to speak over people. Political arrogance is its opposite, rejecting others standing to speak. In democracy, in society as well, but we're talking about political arrogance. Political recalcitrance is another important vice. And here I would direct you to the work of Mark Button, who's been very influential in my thinking about political vices. But it involves going through the motions of listening, but in fact ignoring the other. And we see a lot of that in politics around the world these days, where people are given their moment to speak, but then they're ignored, and the majority does whatever it wanted to do in the first place. There's also a lot of political arrogance where the rulers, the ruling party, will push back so hard, claiming that they don't have to listen, claiming that the opposition is bad in some way and doesn't deserve to be listened to. It's faulty and flawed. So to me, the challenge is re-advancing political humility and advancing it at all levels. So it's in shorter supply these days. We just don't see as much of it as we used to. You might think of it as respect, but really it goes beyond respect, I think. It goes to that idea that I will not only respect you as a human being, but I will take the time to actually listen to you and try to understand what you're saying. So I see our task as globally minded thinkers to challenge the arrogance of so much political discourse these days, including that algorithm-driven online discourse that rewards it. It's arrogance, it's anger that gets you the hits, that gets you the money if you're one of those online influencers. And our task is to encourage the re-advancement of political humility. Well, how do we do that? I think we can do that at multiple levels. We can and must do that. So local democracy is so integrally connected to national democracy, our city councils, our local councils, our states, our provinces. This is where a lot of politics happens. And this is where we try to promote this idea, not only of civility, but of political humility, of listening to others, of treating others with that democratic respect. Democracy at the national level, we try to advance it there. We push back. And I think the No Kings marches, honestly, are a good example of that kind of pushback, saying we deserve to be heard too, even if we're not currently in the majority. Strong implications for regional and global extensions of democracy as a means of challenging the arrogance that's a defining feature of the global system, in which states remain their own final judges in so many areas. And I did write about this quite a bit in the last book. So in the current system, we have universal human rights, but states effectively are the final arbiters of those rights. The UN Special Rapporteur on the rights against torture will come calling, and some surprising nation states will try to send them packing. We'll try to say, you don't have any legitimacy here. We're fine. We're doing this. We're doing this in the right way. The more we can challenge that kind of arrogance that says we don't have to listen to you, I think the more we will be able to advance this kind of democratic political humility at all levels. So at the national level, illiberal, authoritarian leaders and parties have made gains. We've seen it all over the world. Trump administration has made large-scale cuts to overseas aid and its UN dues. The UN is having to lay off massive numbers of people because as a direct result of those cuts. Their moves, however, are often out of step with majority opinion. A lot of what the Trump administration is doing to migrants who are not criminal migrants, they're just undocumented people, is very much out of step, and increasingly more so with majority opinion. You know, we've all probably seen the viral video of the pastor, the cleric, getting shot in the head when he's praying for ICE agents there. Very vigorously, he's shot in the head with a rubber pellet. So surveys had found significant continuing support for global citizenship and institutions. I was part of one of those survey projects, and it was surprising, for how much we hear about anti-globalism, rampant nationalism. The state must be so strong that many ordinary folks actually think of themselves as world citizens even now. So at the regional and global level, we've seen the emergence of regional and global governance bodies that just weren't there in the 1940s. So I spent a lot of time reading world government treatises, including some that were written by people in this virtual room. And so many of them were written back in the 1940s, not only when the bomb, really catalyzed a lot of people's thinking about how fraught the global situation was in an era of nuclear weapons, but also in the years before that, leading up to it, there were some very vigorous campaigns centered on World War II, but also looking at other things. India, I just wrote an article about, Nehru, Gandhi, Ambedkar, thinkers on world government, world order, who were making some very interesting and important claims. But they didn't have anything like the world we have these days. So I spent the last 6 years or so, whenever I could, going around and speaking to people at global organizations and at the UN. And I've determined in my mind that we have something like a shadow world government. All of these bodies are tasked with producing the social goods that regional and world government would be producing. If we had the agencies of a world government, I wager they'd look very much like our current UN system, except hopefully they'd be more strongly empowered to do their job, and they would have more resources to do their job. But right now we have something like a shadow world government. We've got the European Union, Mercosur, the Andean Community, African Union, ASEAN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're all general purpose regional organizations tasked with promoting the welfare of the people in their region. And UN agencies, chronic underfunding and underempowerment, but they fulfill a range of tasks that any global government would be expected to do if it's not tyrannical, if it's a democratic global government. So, as globally minded thinkers, I would say we've got a blueprint, and we can reinforce that blueprint and advocate for it and try to advance it. So, first thing we can do is advocate the strengthening and reinvigoration of liberal constitutional democracy across nation states. We've got a pretty good blueprint for democracy within countries. As part of that advocacy, we can call for renewed support for regional and global organizations toward that ultimate institutional aim, a system in which political arrogance at all levels gives way to a cosmopolitan political humility, one in which all persons are politically empowered to press their own rights and interests in democratic institutions. So this is a lot to the last slide, but I want to bring it all together if I can. It's a long-term aim, certainly, to think about a democratic world government, but it's a worthy aim. And the closer we can get, the better off we'll be, I would argue. And if we never really get there, if we can make steps toward that, that's a better world than the one we've got right now. So we have a blueprint that advocates of human rights and democracy have drafted. We know what a rights-respecting democracy looks like. We've been close enough to see it with some countries. We know what a robustly democratic regional organization would look like. The European Union, not so far away, not so far away. The African Union, if you look at its charter and you look at Agenda 2063 and some of the plans that are there, and I've talked to a number of people now around Addis Ababa, the capital, and just recently in the Pan-African Parliament. And there are these explicit ambitions. There are these plans. They know they're very ambitious plans, but the African Union has outlined plans for a liberal constitutional democracy across a continent of 1.4 billion people. We can envision a global democratic organization. We've got some very good work. Matthias Koenig Archibugi just wrote a book on a realistic utopia, on a realistic global democracy. And he's a numbers person. So he's run all the statistics and done all the hard quantitative political science work, and comes up with the idea that actually it is plausible. Just as democratic transitions within states are plausible, it's plausible to look at longer term democratic transition globally. So what can we do? We can press for democratic equality at all levels, and we can do so steadily. It's a long-term gambit. We can keep that alternate vision in the public eye so that when a better world is possible, we, or those who follow us who are like-minded, will be ready to help build it. Okay, and we can help make that time come. Thank you.
Fantastic, Dr. Luis Cabrera. Thank you so much. Yes, in line with what you said, I also believe and I'm hopeful that we are getting closer to a global system of governance. We do have the European Union, the African Union, the Mercosur, as you said, but however, we need to be very careful with the rise of authoritarian regimes. As we know, democracy. I think it's an analogy. It's a fragile flower. If the petals of the flower are becoming authoritarian under like dictatorship regimes, the flower will die and the planet will die, and we will not have peace. So democracy is fragile at the moment, and we need to continue our effort to counter any sort of authoritarian regime. So thank you so much, Dr. Luis. Now, let's move on to the next speaker, Dr. Rosa Groen. She is a senior researcher, Green and Just Transitions at the Hague University of Applied Science and associate professor sustainability transitions in Holland, the University of Applied Sciences. She is a historian, writer, and public administration scientist, specialized in governance network, public affairs, climate education, political efficacy of youth groups, and green and just transitions. She'll tell us more about the book she just published, Voices of Gen Z, Shaping Transitions in the City of Peace and Justice. So, Dr. Rosa Groen, thank you so much for your participation, and the screen is yours.
Thank you so much. I'll try to share my screen right now. I'm not sure if it's gonna work.
Yes, we can see.
Great. One moment.
No problem.
Okay, so indeed, I was gonna tell something about our new book, Voices of Gen Z, Shaping Transitions in the City of Peace and Justice. But first, I would like to say something about the previous speakers, because Elsie gave a wonderful speech about the importance of the effectuation of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And Luis Cabrera, thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk about taking up the local space to share our ambitions in democracy. Well, our book is actually a little bit a mixture of those two things. So I think it's very fitting. So, dear friends, dear all, imagine you are living in the city of peace and justice, the Hague in the Netherlands, but you are young and you don't really feel like you're living in the city of peace and justice. Imagine that peace and justice doesn't really mean anything to you because you are afraid on the streets, because you are not seeing the institutions like the international tribunals and the peace institutions that are there. Imagine that peace and justice in your small neighborhood is just not being followed by the police and not being harassed by local police forces who often stop young colored boys and girls for no reason? This was the main question we started our book with 3 studies in 3 years, with a lot of young people in The Hague, focusing on SDG 16. So Sustainable Development Goal 16 is peace, justice, and the access to institutions. And why did we think this was important? I did my PhD in Leiden University in The Hague about the City of Peace and Justice, and I compared the City of Peace and Justice to other cities in Europe, and I compared it to look at this, external vision of The Hague of peace and justice, and Geneva with its City of Peace emblem, and I looked at Vienna and Copenhagen as well. But this view of outside peace and justice that The Hague always spreads, this is not spread inside the city. So that's why I wanted to hear from young people, especially Gen Z, born between 1997 and 2012, about what they thought of the City of Peace and Justice, and what peace actually means to them, and what does justice mean. And these terms are actually very far away from them. But we wanted to know from them what they could mean, and how they could advise the local government to include them more in this City of Peace and Justice. I didn't write the book alone. I got some help from Tahir Abbas. He's professor of criminology and professor of de-radicalization. He works now in Aston University. He used to be working in Leiden University. And I've got 2 co-writers, Vasilis and Gijs, for one of the chapters. And we work together with a lot of institutions, local institutions. So the Hague University of Applied Sciences, but also the Asser Institute Center for International European Law, and lots of youth centers that you can see in the middle. And we actually, I'll tell you a little bit later, asked the youth groups also to cooperate with institutions of the international peace and justice sector. So we need a change. Youth groups like the Gen Z generation, between 13 and 28 years old, are very worried. They have a lot of stress. As we can see in the local studies in the Netherlands, 43% of them often feel too much stress, and 45% doesn't want to read the news anymore. Whereas this generation is very connected. As we know, 78% or many of them watch the news only on social media. So they are really, really connected, but they really often feel too stressed about all the pressures that they see, and actually also the educational system that is very harsh for them, and the news that is very overwhelming. So what did we do with the youth groups in The Hague? We work together with students of public administration. Every year, we go to the youth centers, and we ask the students to communicate with the youth groups in the youth centers, often Moroccan origin, but also born in the Netherlands, so they're Dutch people, but often living in disadvantaged areas in The Hague. The Hague is one of the most segregated cities in the Netherlands. So we asked the students to do interviews with them about what they envisioned about peace and justice, and what they envisioned about security feeling at school and in their neighborhoods. And actually what came out of this first pilot study in 2022, imagine it was the last COVID year, so we had still a lot of lockdowns that moment. So the pandemic was still current at that point of time. And they were telling the students, without us really asking specifically about that there was a lot of racial profiling. And that many times they were standing on the streets, they were just taken away by a bus of the police, because they weren't allowed to stand on the street. So this was really scary news, and we knew that it was happening, but we didn't know it was also happening on such a big scale. And actually, one of the other examples in this case study was that young people really felt they wanted to be included in local policy making. So they really wanted a voice, and they really wanted to have a say in what happened at schools. So they were really critical as well on how the teachers taught them history lessons and political science lessons, and they never, 80% didn't ever hear of The Hague being the city of peace and justice. So there was also not education available to them about the city they live in. In the second year, we did a study with the Q methodology. I don't know if you know it, but it's envisioned here on the left side. There's 48 statements. They're all about international organizations, about political inclusion of youth, about what does peace mean, what does justice mean, but there are confrontational statements. So, for example, peace is more important to me than family. Or the police are allowed to do racial profiling because it's more efficient. And those statements they had to put on the scale from very disagree the most and agree the most. But there was only one that they could put on the agree the most with 4 points, and disagree the most with -4 points. So, in making this way of distribution of their statements, it made us it made us available to make groups. And in this study, so groups of narratives, right? So how the groups could be compared. And in this study, we didn't only speak with the youth groups, but we also spoke with the educators of high schools. And we compared their views also with policymakers in the peace and justice sector, just to know if those groups are really divided. And as it turned out in this study, we found that they're not really divided. There were actually 3 groups: participatory peace, we found 3 narratives, inclusive peace, and sustainable peace. And with the sustainable peace, we found a lot of policymakers from the peace and justice sector, but also a lot of youth groups. It meant that we also asked questions about the European Green Deal and the effects of the European Green Deal and what it meant to them. And the sustainable peace was also a narrative about the sustainability is important, that it's actually very logical and natural to give more money and resources to the sustainability of the neighborhoods, especially disadvantaged neighborhoods. And actually, the policymakers and the youth groups were very much in line there. The second, participatory piece, meant that the youth groups and many educators were in that group as well, were very much of the impression that their voice wasn't heard. So they wanted to have more participation in school democracy, but also in the local politics. And they thought that actually having guests over from international organizations or European organizations would be very nice, and ambassadors, and to really meet those people. So actually it was an eye-opener that the 3 groups, the third was a more action type of piece that was very much against racial profiling that happened on the streets. But all the groups were not separated. There were actually 3 narratives with all the groups in there. And one striking story we found also of the educators was that actually some of their students came to school too late because they were often stopped by the police. And in the third and the last study that we showcase in the book, we not only worked with the Q methodology with 24 statements, less statements, but we asked students to go to the youth centers, and also in the disadvantaged areas, and also to the schools. And in the schools, in the more advantaged areas, we could see if the pupils from the schools, like 13, 14-year-old kids, were in the same narrative as the youth group's kids. So we had only Gen Zers in this study. And we did action research. So on the right-hand side, you see a picture with a plus, and that is where the youth group was confronted with one of the peace and justice sector people. So it could be the municipality or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which was in this case a person in the classroom, or it could be a peace and justice organization in the city, or the Hague Humanity Hub, which is really a hub for international organizations in The Hague. So we thought this went very well, and I think the last study, which is not in the book, but we turned towards action research more and more. So to confront and organize dialogues between youth groups and the local policymakers on the topic of peace and justice worked very well, especially if you ask the youth groups for solutions themselves. We thought this worked very well. I put a picture here of Winnie the Pooh because we found 5 narratives this time, and those five narratives correspond with the 5 figures of the Winnie the Pooh characters. So there was a Winnie the Pooh group that consisted of only youth groups from the youth centers with a little bit of younger students from the high schools. They were very much against racial profiling and for a more participatory approach. And I only mentioned 2 more. The Eeyores, they were very depressed group of people that, as for example, the statement, the world is unfair and we can do nothing about it, was one of the highest on their list. And there was the Tigger group that was very active and very reactive. So they were very responsive to things like I want to be included in policymaking and I want to go out and go to demonstrations and be very active. So we did a lot more with those youth groups in the last study, and again, it really helps to confront young people with the local politicians and peace and justice institutions, because then it's not so abstract to them, and then it's also giving them space to their own to find their own voice. So we also made a card set. You can order it if you want with my email address, with 12 human rights. And it's really a card set with, on the one side, for example, your opinion matters, and on the other side, a picture that is very absurd. So, for example, those 2 cards. I'll give you some time to read, because it's really nice to take these cards into a classroom and see how they maybe can be confronted with each other. So as you can see, there is a little bit of text about the human right, and then there is some questions that you can discuss in the classroom. And in the last example, your opinion matters. So your opinion here, it says in Dutch, in the trash bin, and no discrimination. Those can be taken into class and be confronted with each other. For example, you can be yourself, your opinion matters, but what happens if you are very religious and very much against gay marriage, for example, and there's no right to discriminate people, discriminate against people. So yeah, this is some advertising for my book. I will put the link in the chat, and this is the logo of our university. But one last thing, I think this book matters because it's more a call to action than it is really a book of 3 studies, because we really think that bringing youth groups into direct contact with policymakers on the local level helps them realize that those are people too, and there's not a distinction between politics and youth groups. And I also think on a broader scale, you really need to listen to the Gen Zers. They are worried. They are troubled by all the news. They don't know how to deal with that. And if we are not honest about climate crisis, for example, or about other things that are not discussed in class, then there is no way out for them, and they will be blocked. So we really need to include them and listen to their voices in order to let them be the next generation leading our world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosa. That was really good. Thank you for working on your book with your partners, in collaboration with your partners. Yes, I totally agree with you that we need to hear the voices of young people, the Generation Z. Sometimes, lots of times, they can be very bold and creative, and they have the energy. And one of the pillars of democracy is that people should have the right to protest. People should have the right to express their opinions, and the young people should not be silenced. So thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Rosa. So we have concluded our 3 speakers. We can go for a quick question and answer section. Before that, I would like to take a screenshot of this amazing group here. So if you could turn your camera on, and that would be wonderful. And I can take a screenshot, and that can be in our record. So, see. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Now, do we have any question? We have Professor Hans from Korea here as well. Great to see you here, Professor Hans Chateau. Do we have any question to any of the speakers, Dr. Elsie, Rosa, or Luis Cabrera? We have some hands here. We have Mr. Caleb Wanga from Democracy Without Border, Kenya. Do you have a question for any of the speakers or a comment?
Okay, thank you so much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And allow me to thank the great presenters for the good work they have done. Louisa, Elsie, Rosa. My question, allow me to direct different questions to different people, maybe from Rosa. Rosa, how do you talked about the role of the Gen Zs in the democratic space? But also, if we look at the toxicity, how toxic sometimes the intergenerational divide is being used in the political space. How productive do you think this can be? Because it's creating a lot of divisions, sometimes intergenerational divisions that might not be very, very, very productive in the long run. I do want to just to get a comment on that. Then to Professor Luis, you talked about political humility. I know sometimes it's quite difficult to define political humility because sometimes you work in very hostile political environment that humility can be very difficult to achieve. And on top of that, Professor Luis, I would like to hear your understanding on the role of technology in political propaganda. We have social media everywhere that is primarily being used for campaigns, and mostly it is being used to generate a lot also of propaganda and negative information, misinformation for political purposes. What would be your comment on how this can be regulated? And also, finally, just to give a comment on the impact of donor funding cut mostly by the United States government, because some of the programs that were running in the communities were helping a lot in terms of community capacity building of communities to engage in governance. But you realize that when you said disconnected a lot of funding, it has greatly affected a lot of communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Caleb. Dr. Louise or Elsie, would you like Rosa? I think the question was addressed to Dr. Rosa and Louise.
Yes, I'd like to start the toxic relationship between intergenerations, right? And you were also asking, how did you talk about, but I didn't get the word.
What you are asking? I was just talking about the toxicity, intergenerational campaigns that in some places are getting a bit negative when it's about young people against old people. And how does that work in terms of building democratic spaces?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, there is, of course, a lot of misunderstandings between generations. And I think you can take that away when you really start listening. Because when you sit down and listen to the young people, their concerns, you find out that they're not so different from the other people's concerns, right? So it's really about listening and opening up. And especially young people that are that mistrust the government for obvious reasons, because they are discriminated against, and oftentimes they are a group that that is being maybe blunt on the street and seem to be offensive. But actually, when you open up to them, and lots of older people don't dare to do that, there remains the divide. But when you open up to them, they actually want to talk. And they told me that they don't see the police being open to them to talk about peace or about democracy or about their right to vote. And so I don't really think that this answers your question, because it was about the toxicity in intergenerational divisions, especially in political decision making. But I think decision makers can also try to open up and include young groups, especially that are represented by political youth groups, for example. It can really help to get a healthier democracy.
Thank you, Dr. Rosa. Professor Luis?
Thank you. And thanks for those questions. I appreciate it, Mr. Wonga. So the first question, it's a good one. It's the question in many ways. So people are shouting at each other, and how do you come in there and speak about political humility? Political humility is the aim. It's the end point where we're actually all listening to each other and talking to each other. And that can sometimes happen in politics. We're not really in that kind of political age. And I think there are two things. So I'll answer your second question first, because I think that's a huge part of it. Disinformation. And you mentioned regulation at the end there. We used to have regulation of social media spaces. Let us not forget, Donald Trump was once kicked off Twitter for spreading so much disinformation. But then he captured political power, and he and his allies have been able to turn X into the cesspool of misinformation that it is today. So I think regulation is the answer there, and actually requiring those companies to have fact checkers again who do the job and who monitor content and challenge content that's blatantly false. And that would help in some ways. And I think the other answer is empathy. And I know I'm coming here talking about political humility and empathy, and ICE is shooting people in the streets and ramming their cars into people, and it just looks very violent. But I think we're seeing a few political figures in the United States, which is my home country, and I still watch it very closely, having lived there for almost 20 years. But we're seeing a few politicians on the Democratic side say, you know, we can't just dismiss the MAGA folks, the Trump supporters, as ignorant, as not knowing anything, as just racist and hateful people. They've got problems too, and we need to reach out to them and offer them empathy and try to listen and understand what they're saying. We may not agree with it, but we need to understand it, and then maybe they'll listen to us a little better, and we can actually restart the dialogue. And I think that needs to happen. But you know, these are tough times, and this is a tough road. Yeah, good questions though.
Wonderful. Thank you for the answer, for the question, and for the answer. Miss Dora Bender, you've got your hands up as well, so feel free to ask.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for Louise. So this is all new to me, not democracy. Democracy and Federalism Hub is a new NGO in Israel. We have our sister and brother on the Palestinian side that also building the Democracy and Federalism Hub as we speak. Unfortunately, they couldn't have a representative today. So I'm very glad for this opportunity to get to know more people that actually promote democracy. And initially, I think like I am also, when I'm trying to promote democracy, I'm very interested to learn from you, from any of the speaker and any person that is attending, if you have programs that you already being facilitated for youth or general public, that I would be glad to learn more if I can, if you can guide us, both sides, both of the Israeli and Palestinians, and if we can use them, okay? And that would be a great help for us. And also I wanted to say that today we live in this small, this on our phone, you know, we can't be detached. And I see the transition moving the voting system, and also our reality is going to change. In DFH, we also promote civil democracy. I'm not going to expand on it. I will wanted to have an introduction Zoom and hear your thought, and also open a discussion. What is civil democracy? Is it fitting? Is it going to transition to civil democracy? We work with Dr. Hanno Schulz from Switzerland, that he is the father of civil democracy. And we will be glad to engage with everyone that is interested to hear about it. And I want to thank you. So I would have loved to be connected to, honestly, and hear from any of you working in NGO that you facilitate in any democracy or federalism education. We will be glad to learn and cooperate, be honored. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dora, for participating. Any other question? Yeah, Chris, you've got your hand up. You are muted, Chris.
Yes. Okay, hear me now. I have an institutional question for Elsie. I believe the campaign for a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly is looking for the UN General Assembly itself to set up a parliamentary assembly as a subsidiary body. The question is, can you find a national government to propose this idea to the General Assembly and look for a majority support? Would Kenya support it? Would Germany support it? Are there any prospects? Is
Could I
Elsie
go?
still there?
Yes, we can hear you, Elsie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. The question is, can we find any one government, you know, that would support it. I wouldn't say yes, expressly yes or expressly no, because again, with governments, there is a lot more conversation that comes into it, but certainly a good direction to think and look into. I'm sure my colleague at DWB Kenya chapter, Caleb, would add some meat into this. But I would feel that it is important to look into having singular conversations with nations, with governments, and just put it forth and look for buy-in at that level, because then that culminates into, the democratic space that we are trying to expand by having nations buy into ideas of supporting, having everybody contribute, being inclusive, whether as nations, as individuals. So I feel that would be a good way to approach it, and just be bold to take the step and make the conversation and see how it takes on from there. I would probably ask my colleague Caleb to also speak to this from the Kenya chapter. Thank you, Louise.
Caleb, would you like to add something on Elsie's comment or reply, if you are there? Otherwise, we can stay in touch, as Dora suggested. We've got names here. Let's stay connected and continue our fight to keep democracy on the rise. This is planet Earth, and we all live here. We are all together. We shouldn't be, of course, we have geographic locations, but it's one planet. If there is a nuclear weapon, if there is extreme weather conditions, we are all gone. And democracy is key. Democracy is key to keep a good planet. I do believe that most of people in the planet, they are good people, and people vote for good decisions. We cannot let one person take the decision for everybody. So let's protect this beautiful planet Earth. So I think it's Elsie. You have your hands up. Very briefly, Elsie, if you give your you have a final question, Elsie?
Yes, I do have a final question. Thank you, Louise, for the opportunity. And to Dr. Rosa, thank you for that presentation about Gen Zs or Gen Z, if you like. My question is around the use of technology. Today, we know that, everything that we do is really in our hands in terms of technology, in our pockets. We can use it for good or bad. And so I just want to know what are the strategies that we can be able to support our Gen Zs so that they can use their technology as they click, as they make comments, as they make content, to be part of the collective peace building effort, so that the stories that they share, the information that they share, can be used to unite, to advance global peace, global technology, inclusion, equity, and certainly to listen to each other. How do we help so that technology is used for good and not for divide?
Very good question and very complicated to answer. But as we have seen in our studies, most of the news that they look at is on social media. So what many of the youth groups themselves advised was to have people from their own generation to be a front runner, to have influencers that are really part of the peace and justice sector from their age, that can be spreading the word of inclusion and spreading the word of democracy and why it's important to vote and why it's important to let your voice be known. So that is one thing, that they need really I can't find the right word, but really the people that they're key figures for them, that they are visible on the internet. And for the NGOs, it's the same. If the NGOs want to spread their words, the Peace and Justice NGO, for example, in The Hague, then they need to be visible for them, and they need to interact with them and listen to them. So it's the same message. Just open your ears and eyes, and be active and interact, because otherwise, when they are not heard, then their voices will be lost. And I think it's very important to step towards them also online.
Thank you, Dr. Rosa. Thank you so much. Yes. So final question, and then we can close our webinar. Howie Rapudo, do you have a question for any of the speakers, or would you like to deliver some comments?
Louis, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I think I was on the background listening and following what is going on, and very.
We lost him.
We don't hear you anymore.
Yeah. Howie, so if you can.
Interesting things are coming out, because from Kenya, You can hear me now? And what is happening is that it's important to understand two things which are very critical, or three. One is the infrastructure of governance and political economy, which is also very important. We cannot talk about peace and security and democracy when we don't look at that and we look at issues of participation. Because the voice always comes out when the issue of participation is affected in issues of control. And control means that everybody is not able to find a place within the infrastructure of a country or a nation or the world. And this is also affecting their value systems. So it's important when you're bringing out that to look at now that digitization has come in, who controls the infrastructure of the digitization on the internet space? Where are the values that are promoted there? Are they values that are ensuring citizenship or ensuring that there's a lot of democracy being bring out? So it's important to bring that, and I acknowledge Elsie and Caleb in this meeting. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Howie. I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly. Yes. There are so many obstacles and challenges to achieve a global democracy. But ultimately, we need to carry on being positive, having hope, and being engaged with organizations and government and universities, institutions. Because we do need to care about our planet Earth. So thank you so much, everybody. Great participation here. It's great to see so many faces, and it's time to close the meeting. Let's continue our fight for global democracy. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Luis.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And have a good one. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.